Hello and welcome to Connect. I'm Simon Hyatt. Once again, we're out of the studio and on location this week, making a couple of stops to learn about the future of the city's growth, as well as the future of one of its foremost athletic facilities. And as always, we want to connect with you. You can tweet us at Shaw TV Connect, give us a like on Facebook, email shawtvconnect@shaw.ca, or give us a call, 665-3796. And now here's what we're connecting to today. Gordie Howe Bowl has played host to thousands of events, and it's starting to show its age. A new campaign to renovate and expand the scope of the facility is underway. We'll hear from the head of the foundation. But first, after decades of having a relatively stable population, the City of Saskatoon is going through a full-on boom, with 10,000 people moving here in the past year alone. That could be just the tip of the iceberg, however. Randy Grauer will join us to talk about how the city is preparing for up to 1 million residents in the area. Well, the City of Saskatoon has certainly seen some dramatic growth in recent years, but folks, you haven't seen anything yet. This place is ready to truly boom over the next 50 years or so. Here to join us, Randy Grauer, who is the General Manager of the Community Services Department here at lovely City Hall. Thank you so much for joining us. Not bad to come out on a day like this and get some sunshine, Randy.
It's great. Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, we really appreciate it because this is interesting stuff. Before we get into the meat of this, the growth, what we'll be seeing in the coming years, let's find out a little bit about yourself working in the planning side of things. What drew you to that line of work? How did you end up here at City Hall?
Well, I think early on in my university life, I was drawn to urban planning, urban and regional planning, because it's a really good opportunity to affect quality of life right at the municipal level. And shortly thereafter, I joined the City of Saskatoon, and I've loved it ever since. Really get a chance to improve quality of life right at the ground level.
Yeah, it must be a really interesting profession. I mean, you're really kind of shaping everything that happens here in the city in a way.
Yeah, no, we have a lot of dedicated teams working on this stuff. It is really fulfilling.
I think a lot of people might kind of have the idea that the way a city ends up looking is somewhat haphazard. You know, people just kind of build here and there. How much of it is haphazard, the way Saskatoon now looks, and how much of it was the result of careful planning and design?
Well, we're always looking a long ways off into the future. And like today, our population is basically rubbing up against 250,000. Almost 300,000 in the region. And the areas that we're developing today, the new neighborhoods, that we started setting those lands aside and planning for those almost 30 years ago. You know, when I just started with the city about 30 years ago, I can remember setting aside, working on the lands that are now being developed as rosewood. Mm-hmm. And thinking that far ahead makes for a very effective and efficient neighborhood and an economical neighborhood. So I can easily recall looking 30 or 40 or 50 years ahead. It's funny how the years go by.
And it must be really remarkable for someone in your position to see that come to fruition when you see these neighborhoods like that, especially in the northern part of the city. They grow up and
right.
It's really developed dramatically in recent years.
Oh, for sure. And again, the lands up in the northern parts of the city, the northeast, out in the far west, a lot of those lands were acquired by developers even 50 years ago. And so we really have to have a long-term view to do effective regional planning.
But it really has gone crazy in the last little while, especially. 10,000 new citizens in just the last year. I mean, that's the kind of thing, can you even anticipate that? I mean, that is really remarkable growth.
It's a big number, and it's an exciting time to be in Saskatoon. It's an interesting challenge to keep up with that. But really what we've been talking about lately with our integrated growth plan for inside the city and our new regional planning process that we want to start with our partners is really to be prepared for that. We want to get ahead of it and be prepared so we can facilitate that kind of growth.
So right now, the city itself, about 246,000 people. The census metropolitan area, about 284,000. Give us people an idea. What are we talking about specifically with the census metropolitan area? What does that all incorporate?
Well, it's just the immediate region around Saskatoon. Includes, Martinsville, Warman, Osler, and the arm of Cormant Park. But it's the immediate area around the city.
And really, that's kind of the area that seems to be taking off, especially as you look to the future. It's a lot really to the north, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one of the fastest growing CMAs in Canada by percentage. And again, the CMA, like, it grew over by 12,000 people in the last year. So 10,000 of that in Saskatoon, 2,000 in the other communities. Like Martinsville and Warman, a couple of our great regional partners, they've grown by about 50% in the last 5 years or
Wow.
so. They're two of the very fastest growing communities in Canada. Saskatoon region is a great place to live, and a lot more people want to move here than want to move away. So it's a good story.
That is a good story because, in some ways, that's the opposite of what we saw, maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Right, exactly. I think, I don't want to overstate it, but population growth is is a really universal indicator of community success. It's not the only one, but it just shows that there's a lot of people that want to come to your community, and we've seen that in the last 5 years.
That's outstanding. So, of course, there has to be a partnership then between the city of Saskatoon and those towns, your Warmans, your Martinsville, and I guess even Osler, getting out into the reserve type land. I mean, is that a tricky relationship working? Because obviously everyone has their own interests, but you have to all work together.
We've had a partnership agreement with the RM of Corman Park, our immediate neighbor that we share a border with. And we've been working with them directly successfully for, I'd say, 50 years. And really what we want to do is enhance our relationship with Corman Park, as we have a district planning arrangement with them. And we'd like to invite some other partners into that arrangement and have a more formal relationship with Martinsville, Warman, Osler, and First Nations governments that have holdings in the region. The vision is, if we have strong partnerships, that gives us the best opportunity for a sustainable and prosperous future. If we're all doing our own thing and not talking and communicating, we really don't have much of a chance for a prosperous future.
For sure. As a lot of people probably know, at one time, Sutherland was its own separate town. It became part of Saskatoon.
Correct.
Do you see a time when we might just incorporate Warman, Martinsville, those types of areas, or do you think they will always be their own separate entities?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to speculate on jurisdiction or
Sure.
governance right now. All I know is that we just want to start this process. If something like that happens decades down the road, it would unfold organically, but that's certainly not in our minds at the moment.
And last year you started looking at a plan, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, where you're anticipating maybe 500,000 people
Right.
in the general area. And now that's increased where we might be looking at 50 years from now, maybe 1 million people in this general region?
Yeah, and what's interesting, if you look at Calgary, and it's a really good example, you look at Calgary 50 years ago or so was 250,000 people. Now it's 1.2 million. So, and in many respects, Saskatoon and Saskatchewan has as much or more opportunity than Calgary did at the time. And so it's very easy to see, well, Calgary went from 250 to 1.2 million. Well, Saskatoon's kind of poised to be in that same situation. And so we're just compelled to stay ahead of that.
Obviously, a lot of things have to go right for that to happen. How confident are you that we'll get into that range, get into, what would be a major city?
Well, I just know what's happened, how much we've grown in the last 5, 6, 7 years, and how much our regional partners have grown in that time, and we're just compelled to stay out in front of that. So, I can't predict, will this high rate of growth continue indefinitely? But the risk, if we do nothing or if we don't adequately prepare, there's a much higher risk than if we're a little bit better prepared, have a little bit more food for supper than a little less. Yeah, we want to be better prepared than less prepared.
And I guess part of that preparation, there's some meetings coming up in the fall, getting ready for that. What is the process really for getting towards that? What is happening with this plan as we move to this increased population?
Yeah, and really what we unveiled to Council last night and what Council endorsed was a process. You know, we have a map attached which is an illustration of what the region might look like in 50 years, but it's really an illustration, just a starting point for discussion. It draws people, people can sort of focus on a map or a picture. It engages people rather than just words on paper. But we want to start a process, and we'll continue to have informal discussions throughout the summer and into the fall, and then in November we'll have a set of formal meetings to kick the whole thing off.
That's great. Well, Randy, it's going to be very interesting to watch how this develops, not only in the coming months, but coming years, coming decades. Exciting times in Saskatoon. Thank you so much for talking to us about it today.
Thanks for coming. It's great.
All right, we're going to take a quick break here on Connect. Coming up after the break, we'll be over across the city at Gordie Howe Bowl, finding out what the future holds for them. Gordie Howe Bowl has played host to thousands of events, and it's starting to show its age. A new campaign to renovate and expand the scope of the facility is underway. We'll hear from the head of the foundation.